So can Games Workshop get anything right? The past couple of vlogs, we've been asking some critical questions about Games Workshop from the perspective of those of us who are passionate about the 40K community, those of us that are passionate about the Age of Sigmar community, even Lord of the Rings. We want to love Games Workshop. We do love Games Workshop, but some of their policies just drive us nuts. And it's kind of this duality, this relationship with Games Workshop, because Warhammer 40,000, I've spent a lot of time playing 40K. All of it well spent. All of it absolutely well spent, creating so many memories, but it has introduced me, no other game, Dungeons & Dragons has, absolutely, but not like Warhammer 40K, because of the passion of the community. 40K has been a way to, yes, have some fun, build some miniatures, roll some dice, win some tournaments, get a lot of loot, get a lot of prizes. But more than that, it's been a great way to meet new friends and to meet people that outside of the spectrum of my daily day-to-day work life, I would never meet. So it's allowed me to make great friends, both in person, online, on various forums and YouTube channels. I mean, it's been an amazing experience. It's been an amazing ride. And it's been a great way to immerse myself in that narrative and that creative aspect. It's natural to be a little bit cranky, or it's natural to be invested or passionate about the hobby. So I understand that duality. I understand that Games Workshop needs to make money, especially as they've crossed over a long, long time ago from a company making money, making board games, to now an IP, to now shareholders, to now essentially a brand. And once you cross over to a brand, yes, you've got a community, but you care less about the community, and it's more about just making buckets of money for shareholders and for return. And that tends to take things in very interesting ways. I mean, just look at Star Wars. Nothing else needs to be said on that. But that said, there are a number of things that Games Workshop learned early on. And that, I feel like that knowledge early on, they've only refined and they've carried over, and that they've monetized it to the dark side, but that's the reason why they're so successful. And there's some things that they absolutely do right. The first thing, of course, the miniatures, the models. You can say whatever you want about Games Workshop. They've never toned down the models, meaning they realize, yes, their money is in selling models, although we also ask the question, selling books and components is now almost, and books could be physical or even digital, that's almost at the point where it's expensive as your army. I mean, it's getting crazy. But they realized early on, Citadel and moving into Games Workshop, the miniatures are the focus. The promise of the miniatures. You see those miniatures on the shelf. You build, you paint them, you play them. There is something addictive about the miniatures and how they look and how awesome they look. When you pick them up, you visualize, wow, if this was in my army, if I had this on the table, I would just win this week, and I wouldn't have to hear about it every week and get texts from my friends because I lost the game. Just if I just get some more miniatures, I'm ready to go. They could have, honestly, they could have toned down those miniatures at any time. They could have pulled back and cut down on the quality. They could have made the sculpts a little bit more ho-hum or a little bit less, not as complicated, which costs money for molds and stuff. They could have said, well, we don't need to release more miniatures, just keep milking what we have. They've stayed way ahead of the competition. I mean, certainly having the money and resources to do that. But even back in the day when they were much, much smaller, late 80s, early 90s, they were always pushing, in that moment, cutting edge miniatures. So with that understanding, that's always been something that they've done absolutely right. And they still have the lead. There's other hobbies out there gaining speed. If we just look at the board gaming community, now there's Epic Miniatures being included. Pull out the sculpts from Nemesis and look at those. And you're like, wait a second, these are close to Games Workshop. These are fantastic miniatures, and it's a board gaming miniature. It's board games. That gap is closing, but Games Workshop does know how to do that correct. They know how to support the miniatures with components, and this is something that's only gotten better over time. And again, they've gone way above and beyond. If we pull in the modules, if we pull in the source books, if we pull in the army books, it's not just a list. There's artwork, there's narrative. You're reading both the rules and immersing yourself into the 40K or Age of Sigmar narrative. I sometimes pull down some of the older source books and just read through them and get caught in the artwork. You have to agree the artwork is absolutely fantastic. They refined, they nailed, they perfected that grimdark artwork. And this also carries over into the components. If we look at their gaming components, Blackstone Fortress, Cursed City, or even going back a little bit further, looking at Silver Tower, the miniatures are fantastic. The components, the boards, the tokens, everything but the D6s. They still always pack in generic D6s. But those components, they are the equivalent of premium board game components. Games Workshop has always said, like, what's component-wise, here's the lowest that we can do. Here's like a card game that we can print it out and it's just so low quality, we don't even care. They don't do that. Here's kind of the industry standard. It looks great. It works. It's functional. We can get away with it. Nobody will say a word. They don't do that. Here's the premium. Here's like Nemesis, premium. Okay, that's the baseline, and we're going to take it up. Say what you want. Their delivery, their narrative, their artwork, their components, their miniatures is always top line. And they've always made that a core value, a focused value that, as of right now, no one else is really doing. There's a couple of places that are coming close, but they don't have the sustainability, or they don't have, I think, the long-term commitment that Games Workshop does. But that's the big thing that they do right. And that's the big thing that keeps me coming back and saying, Games Workshop, I'm really angry at you. But, okay, I'm going to buy those new miniatures, and I'm going to buy that source book, and I'm going to be really angry at you, but here's my miniatures, and I'm playing 40K. And of course, as always, definitely the community. So in the comments, refocus, readjust. What does Games Workshop do right? If we were looking at this from a business model in terms of player engagement, cash flow, and the aspects of their business model, what are they doing correct? And there has to be something. There has to be other things. I got a couple of other ideas too. That's keeping them number one at the top, even as they go the way of Star Wars and kind of head in that direction. They're still really, really doing a lot of things correct.